Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs. And before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind you, please, if you're listening on a streaming platform, give this 5 stars. This podcast needs it for some exposure. It helps other people see it. You're listening to it. You found it somehow. Let's help others find it. One thing Shane said that really stuck with me: good architecture is care. And part of that is choosing the right materials, ones that do their job quietly, reliably, and beautifully. That's what Sound Solutions brings. They've been around since the late 60s, and their expertise in cladding, acoustic panels, and building systems spans everything from commercial towers to residential work. They're not just distributors. They work shoulder to shoulder with design teams, practices like KPMB and Diamond & Schmidt, helping coordinate from concept to delivery, especially when performance matters. It's that behind-the-scenes support that makes them such an asset to the design world. If you'd like to connect with them, please feel free to reach out to me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca. And another reminder that if you want to see the work of the people that I speak with here, I would highly recommend you check out Behind the Build on Instagram. It's a blue logo, same as what you're looking at on any of the streaming services. Same logo, and you'll be able to see the visuals of the dialogue that we describe on the podcast. So, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Shane Czypyha from Parkin, also known as Parkin Architects. They're based out of Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. And you have, you also have another office, right?
Yeah, we have a Toronto office, which is our original office. Yeah. And we also have an Ottawa office.
Right. So 3 offices. And Shane, so thanks for taking time. Shane's based on the West Coast, so it's really early for him in some ways, comparatively to my midday stretch here. Shane and I spoke at the end of 2014 and just kind of got an introduction to each other and what this podcast is about, understand a little bit more about him and his involvement at the practice. Shane is one of the principals. And so, Shane, I will open it up to you by asking you, as I do everyone, at what stage of your life did you start getting involved in some level of like doodling or design, and what sparked that interest in you early on?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to join you. Really enjoy the podcast. So I wanted to be an architect since I was 5. I don't know that I actually did want to, but I don't think I knew what it meant. But adults around me told me that I must be this budding architect, and so that's what I started saying I wanted to be. The reason really was because I was obsessed with Lego.
Yes.
I had a small Lego town that took up most of the room in the basement, and was absolutely obsessed with it. Building street networks and houses and buildings and things. And then I also grew up in a small town with a huge extended family, and so
Whereabouts?
In Exeter, Ontario.
Okay.
So if you know Grand Bend on Lake Huron, it's the next town over.
Got it.
And I had a grandpa and a couple uncles and several cousins that were all carpenters. So I was constantly around building. I was around renovations, additions, new houses, kitchens, being torn apart, deck builds. And I think it was when I was maybe 8 or 9, one of my uncles gave me this 100 house floor plans magazine, the kind that you'd pick up at like Home Hardware or something.
Okay.
And so my dad gave me draft paper, and I studied the book and started drawing my own houses and imagining buildings of my own.
Yeah.
And I guess I was thinking about, I knew you were going to ask me this question. I was thinking about when I was 10, that's when my parents decided that we needed to move to London so that they could shorten their commute to work. And I was very against this. I really wanted to stay in Exeter. I loved my life there. So I broke out the draft paper and started designing an addition to our house. I somehow thought that, maybe if the house was better, we'd stay. And so I ended up, it was a raised bungalow. I ended up designing effectively a side split, like kind of the traditional side split that you see all over suburban Ontario.
And were you that was just an idea that you had come to, or was it because you had been studying what was going on in other houses in the area, and that was something that you saw as an opportunity?
I want to say, my post-rationalizing architect self wants to say that I looked at the site and this was the solution that best fit the site.
Yeah, 9.
I probably was just ripping it off from one of these designs in the book, but I wasn't able to convince my parents to stay. But they ended up buying a side split in London, so they must have liked the design at least. So it was kind of my initial start, and then high school, getting into tech design, learning AutoCAD, doing a co-op placement, and next thing I know, I'm applying to Waterloo. That's where I went to for both my undergrad and master's.
I want to ask you a silly question about the Lego.
Sure.
Because I was also vehemently play-based in Lego and Playmobil, which was obviously not as loose as what Lego could be. Were
Right.
you the type of Lego user? I don't even know if that's the right word, but we'll go with it.
Enthusiast?
And that's much better. Oh, your diction is way better than mine. Were you the type of enthusiast that liked to follow the plans that were provided with the pieces, or did you build and then destroy and mix it all together and then rebuild your own creations as you described?
Well, I always loved receiving the new box of
Yeah,
Lego
yeah.
and following the plan and building it coming to fruition. So maybe that was the contractor side of my family, but then you tear it apart, you play with
Yeah.
it for a couple of days, and then you tear it apart, and then you start doing other things with it. That's really where I loved it.
It was funny, when I was young, I used to build them, and then I would tear them apart, and then I'd build it again based on the instructions. And every time I would try to reduce a page of the instructions to keep it in memory and
Interesting.
see if I could
You were
I could
destined
get
to be a
deeper.
contractor.
So actually, within our organization, it's not what I do. I'm not involved in the construction as much. But that just the con of like trying to train your mind to remember the connectivity of it and the pieces. Yeah. Anyhow,
Very interesting.
and I've like had boxes and boxes of it, which now I realized I should have kept all of it. Right?
Oh
Imagine you
yeah.
had kept it all. It would save so much money for kids.
It's very true. I did. My parents did ship across the country to me in Vancouver a small box of my original Lego, so my
Oh,
kids
they
now
still
play with it.
had it?
Yeah,
Are they still in the side split?
they're not in the side split, but
Okay.
yeah, they moved to the West Coast as well.
Okay. All right. So sorry. So now going back, we're sitting in the DeLorean and we just went back and now we're gonna go forward again.
Sure.
Back to the Future number 2. So you go to University of Waterloo for your education in post-secondary, and describe that. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, it was eye opening between the co-op program and the Rome program.
Yeah.
Your eyes are open to the world, and they do such a great job of bringing in a terrific mix of incredibly talented students through the interview process. I felt imposter syndrome when I got accepted because I went for my interview and it was Rick Haldenby, the director at the time, the longtime director,
Mhm.
and a few students that interviewed me. And I look back and I was woefully underprepared. I had some sketches, some drawings. I played a song on the guitar that I wrote. I showed
In your interview?
in my interview,
Good for you.
I showed a couple movies on VHS for for short films that I created for our high school film festival. And I just remember Rick was so kind how he put it, but you have a lot of diverse interests, but you don't have the visual artistic ability of many of your peers. How might you overcome this? And it was a little stark to hear, but and I came up with some answer. But he accepted me, he appreciated me, and I appreciated his pointing that out. But I really learned that like Waterloo has this cultural history stream that is an absolute strength of the program. I learned a lot over my time there that architecture really isn't just about beautiful images.
Yeah.
The architect is this conduit of communication and storytelling. So like things like debate or dialogue, arguments, persuasion, but also compassion and celebration, support, visioning. That's all kind of part of what it is to be an architect.
Mhm.
And the visual medium is really just one of the communication methods. So I just really, I took away so much from that at Waterloo.
Yeah.
And it's how I realized that I could fit in even if I wasn't the best sketcher or visual artist.
I was gonna say, I think one of the other adjectives I would throw in there is like an extractor, that
Yeah.
art, that's like one of the key components of what have come to understand of architecture is that you need to be able to extract information from the client, all of the gray that happens from what happens on site. Like you just have to sift through and pull it out of people to be able to find what that solution is.
Yeah, absolutely. And synthesizer.
Yeah.
You extract and then you synthesize.
I like this. We're using all terms from like the 80s and 90s. So for those that are unaware, okay, if you're listening to this and you're born in like the late 90s, perhaps the early 2000s, you very well might not know what a VHS is. Just for some educational purpose here, is it's a video home system. It's a tape that you inject into a device to play a movie. Okay. Yes, I know
VCR.
Netflix and chill, where you're just using a remote to go find your movie or show. But back then, we used to be able to watch, you have to go to a store and rent them. Okay.
Or tape off of TV.
Or I was going to say, or tape off of TV. And if you went really deep into that, you would tape and then you would pause the recording at commercials to have one seamless movie.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the art.
So, so I completely digress yet again.
I appreciate it.
So you have this fantastic experience at school, and so tell me what it was like when you were able to go to Rome. Like how did that change your perception of the world that you knew? Because it's such a variation from what you would have grown up with.
Oh yeah. It was my
and had you traveled much prior to that?
Well, maybe to answer that question, maybe I'll start with co-op, because
Sure.
I was this Exeter and London kid.
Yeah.
And really hadn't, I actually imagined a life where I was going to return and open a practice in London, Ontario. That's sort of where I pictured my life going.
Maybe
but
that's
co-op,
a pitch to Parkin for later on.
I'm okay. I'll let someone else handle that office.
Exactly.
But the co-op program is really amazing. 2 years worth of experience, and it's over 5 co-op terms.
Right.
And so you get this great chance to see either, your local community, exposure to architecture firms and different styles, but also, experience other cultures around the world. So I did one of my co-op terms in Victoria and really enjoyed that. It was the summer in Victoria, and I had spent a bunch of time in Vancouver, and I realized I really like this coast. I think Vancouver is a compelling city. I want to come back for that. So I did an 8-month co-op there and, worked with Via Architecture. And then that was the 8 months where I really got to see the West Coast and fall in love with it, and experience all of the big and amazing things about it, like skiing the mountains or surfing the coast or things like that, traveling down to places like Seattle or beyond. And then I actually did my final co-op term in Honolulu, which might have had something to do with those trips to Tofino. I was becoming a very avid very beginner surfer at the time. So yeah, that co-op program gives you this amazing opportunity to start to see the world. But the Rome program, that was my first time going to Europe, and that's incredibly eye-opening. I spent over 3 months in Rome, the eternal city, and we get to spend a whole bunch of time on these field trips to the north, to the south. You see all a whole ton of Italy. So many small cities, big cities, ancient sites. Rick Haldenby, who I mentioned before, is this incredible vessel of knowledge about ancient Rome and antiquity. And so that's amazingly eye-opening. But then also it's so close to so many other parts of Europe. So I spent a lot of my time myself in Western Europe, traveling with friends, seeing other cities, kind of learning about a very different condition of urbanity, day-to-day life in these dense urban centers, pedestrian streets and beautiful public spaces, and just really saw so far beyond that suburban condition that I grew up in, or small town condition. I loved it so much that I actually went back and did my first term of master's as well at Rome. So I did a second kick at the can, another kind of 3-4 month stint, where I spent more time traveling to other European cities and really kind of started. I ended up doing a very urban focused master's thesis that was looking at pedestrianization of cities and spaces.
Something that's become so prevalent nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, active transportation and public space and public forum.
Okay, and so you finished your master's, and then what did life look like at that point? You were in Rome, and what
Uh,
you
I did 4 months in Rome and then finished the master's in the architecture school in Cambridge. And Cambridge itself is another interesting thing. I actually started my undergrad on main campus in Waterloo, got kind of to experience that everyday university life.
yeah
Living in a dorm and friends in other faculties and playing intramural sports and things like that. And then partway through undergrad, the new school opened in Cambridge, which really was a great thing. It was a beautiful setting in this terrific building that was renovated and designed to, sitting along the river. And it was just so that we were 400 students moved from main campus that were very alone. So we really had to form our community. We had to work really hard to create that new community. And that's one of the big takeaways I got from Waterloo is like the strength of community and how architecture itself has got a lot of individuals and a lot of personality, but it's not an individual thing. It's really about the people around you, who you work with and who you work for. So that was one of the huge takeaways. We really built this amazing blossoming community in this new building, kind of all alone down there in Cambridge, and really made the most of it with a lot of incredible efforts by, student societies and kind of creating our own social scene or network and, running gallery events or like Pachacuchas and things like that, where we really kind of started to share in our work and share in our life and share in our social scene. And that was a huge takeaway for me there.
Corey and I talked a lot about the detail of how things are built and having the right partners in place. One of those partners I count on, and we count on at Walden Homes, especially when we're working on complex architecture, is the Doors for You. They've been around since 2006, and what's unique about them is how closely they work with architects and builders, right from the shop drawing phase. They're not just ticking boxes, they're engaged in the design, understanding the intent, and offering guidance on how to achieve it. Whether it's PVC, aluminum, wood, or steel, they've got access to a wide range of materials and handle everything in-house. From measurements, installation, and even service. No outsourcing, no handoff. That's huge. They've helped us pull off some tight builds with very little room for error, and honestly, I don't think I've had a single install with them where something wasn't anticipated and already taken care of. They just know what they're doing, and they care about doing it right. If you would like to be connected and speak to Martin about the product, about the company, feel free to reach out to me, Jonathan, JONATHAN at waldenhomes.ca. I'm happy to connect you. And do you still keep in touch with many of the students that you'd gone to school with that are now either acting professionals or moved on to different fields?
Yeah, an absolute ton of them. I'm very close with many of them, and a few of them live a few blocks away from me here in North Vancouver. Amazing. Or in the Lower Mainland. Some of my very close friends. Some are principals or management in firms in Ontario. Recently, chatting with a friend who's shifting careers in Hong Kong. We have an amazing kind of tight knit, almost like family like group that studied together. So we were really fortunate for that.
It's nice, as you're saying it, I can see the smile on your face talking about this. And it's an important thing. When I went to school, and I did not have that same type of a connectivity in school to post school. When I say post, like from post secondary,
yeah,
you must have stayed in touch.
It's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing, and it can be transactional, but it's hard to make it meaningful.
Yeah, well, it's also because the program is a relatively small program, right? Like there's a handful of people that are selected to be a part of it in a given year.
Yeah, it was 60 in my year. So, it's possible to know 60 people.
Yeah.
And it's really possible to know 20 of them incredibly well.
Yeah, that's very fair. Okay, so you finished your master's, and then what did it look like for you? Where did you go? Did you go directly to a practice, or did you have another summer job that took over and that led you down a different path? Like, what did it look like?
So I I was very strategic with my master's thesis. I was reimagining downtown Vancouver and kind of critiquing the public space and the kind of ethos of Vancouver. looking at a pedestrian solution. So I had to spend time in Vancouver during my master's thesis to go and do research, so I could go back and spend time in the city I loved. And then when I finished my master's, it was a race to Vancouver as fast as possible. I couldn't wait to get back, and it was the Olympics coming to town right around that time. So I ended up getting a job with Canon Design, who had designed the Richmond Olympic Oval, which was the cornerstone, the centerpiece architecture of the Olympics. And so I was really excited about that. I was really excited about their sports work, and thought, this could be really exciting getting into sport facilities design. But I ended up being put onto a P3 hospital project in northern BC. That's a public-private partnership. And I'd say I learned an appreciation for the puzzle that healthcare planning presents. There's like these intensive requirements that involve things like adjacencies, flows, and really just like the relationship of spaces. And I guess like the challenge that's presented by creating good layouts that really respond to these needs, that diverse requirements. Yeah. And then on top of that, there's a really terrific group of professionals there at Canon that I met some great people that I still stay in touch with today. And so that was sort of what got me started in Vancouver proper after graduating. I then worked at Frankel for 1 year.
Sorry, how long were you at that again?
At Canon, between 2 and 3 years.
Okay.
I thought I wanted to break from healthcare, and went to Frankel and got some experience on a really cool project, YVR's airside operations building. I stepped into a job captain role there, but I also got a taste of kind of high-rise residential condo design, and I really quickly learned that wasn't what I wanted. And that's around that time is when one of these amazing mentors from Canon reached out to me and came calling, asking if I'd like to join this new office that Parkin was establishing in Vancouver, because they needed a BIM manager. I actually, in one of my co-op terms, learned BIM from one of the kind of driving forces in BIM adoption in Vancouver and BC, a man named Dimitri Harvelius, who probably taught hundreds of Vancouver-based architects how to use it. And I was one of his early students, so I was fortunate to kind of be in on the ground floor there with Revolution. And so I was a bit of a commodity, I suppose, at that time. I got pulled back over to Parkin to join them for a P3 hospital pursuit on Vancouver Island. And that's how my journey started at Parkin. That was about 12 years ago.
And so how many people were at the Vancouver office that you were part of helping to establish?
I was the fifth.
You were the fifth person there.
That's right. Yeah. We were starting kind of based on the backs of winning one P3 project remotely. It was enough to establish an office in Vancouver. And then, this was our first real attempt at winning a local project based out of Vancouver.
And of the 5 people that were there, were the other 4 all based out of Vancouver, or did they bring in anyone from Toronto?
So John McSween, one of the directors, at that point relocated to Toronto. Another employee came with him. They hired Young, the mentor that I was mentioning from Canon, and then he brought in myself and one other person from Canon. And next thing you know, we got this little team, hired a student, and then we got the ragtag group that that was enough to do a pursuit for one of these P3 hospitals.
Wild. So that first hospital is essentially the catalyst for the entire operation to have how many people now?
We're approaching 100.
100 people at the office.
In British Columbia, we have a few remote workers on Vancouver Island and a few in the interior, but it would be approaching 90 locally.
Wow. Okay. So if my math is right, that's like, if you had about 5 for a project then, so you got about 20 hospitals or something like that.
No, it's not a direct correlation.
Yeah, I know.
We grew as the projects have evolved.
So then tell me about the evolution of the practice since you were one of the first 5. What has 12 years of Parkin in Vancouver look like?
It's a great question. So we originally were pursuing kind of a double project. It was 2 community hospitals in kind of smaller mid-sized communities in Vancouver Island. They were supposed to be sort of like for like. We didn't win that one, and then from there we were constantly pursuing our first We got a small it was a fit out project of some shell floors at Vernon Jubilee Hospital. We then won a small project, a mental health project we consider small, I guess. It was about, if I recall correctly, 100,000 square feet at Vancouver General Hospital. So that was the Joseph and Rosalie Siegel Center. And that was sort of our first major win in the Vancouver office. And that then led to a Penticton Regional Hospital, which was maybe 2.5 times the size of that. And then eventually moving on to Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops, a bit bigger than that. Then next comes what was at the time maybe the biggest project in BC for a hospital project, Royal Columbian in New Westminster. So each project you see getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
Each team that is needed to execute it needs to get bigger and bigger. So it's not the business model of Parkin Wide, but the Vancouver office itself, we have a fairly small number of projects because we have such large teams dedicated to them.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, given what you're talking about in that kind of sequential growth, how was the business able to acquire the opportunities? Was it through RFP processes, or was it through some connections through the initial setup that you had the connections from the Toronto office? Like, how did it come to be that you had these opportunities?
So it's generally all through RFP processes, and they're basically all design, build, and public-private partnerships. We have a long-standing partnership with with a couple of the top builders or contractors in the country. We're definitely one of the first architects that they call when there's a project they're interested in the healthcare field or in kind of more broadly the social architecture field.
Yeah.
And so those are good relationships to have because you need a good contractor in a design build model or in a P3 model. It's a huge part of it. So that partnership has helped us, and it's a proven track record that started with our Ontario work and has kind of continued on with our success in Vancouver.
Okay. So the main focus that you're looking at is healthcare.
Yeah, that would be fairly accurate. We in the Vancouver office have been a victim of success of our ability to win these hospital projects, which has kind of slowed our ability to build other sectors. But in our Toronto and Ottawa offices, we have a pretty diverse portfolio that expands far beyond that. We have our vision statement is creating environments that positively impact lives. Yeah. So we really pride ourselves on tackling projects that we consider to be social architecture, and it's really about prioritizing the needs of the community, the well-being of the community in all of our projects. And we see it as striving to create environments that promote human connection, health, happiness, and just kind of strengthen community. And you have to think about how our projects and how our work impacts the world really on the day-to-day level.
So like what are some of the elements that you look to apply? Because when people I talk to, when you talk about a hospital, like you think of this like stark place that in some ways almost like, this is a terrible thing to say, but like almost like welcomes the end of life in some way, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to say it, but because there's there's birthing suites, but then there's also palliative care, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
how do you look at that from an opportunity to be able to see those that are on a potentially in a challenging stage of life, to be able to be there and feel that the environment is there to help actually invigorate them and get them back into the world? Because it's a massive undertaking to kind of infuse someone with the desire for more life, and that environment does it or doesn't.
It does or doesn't. It's true. It's the success of the care it starts with the success of the building.
Yeah.
As a project. So like I think that's probably
a pretty broad question.
It's a 3-part answer, 4-part answer, maybe 5. I don't know.
You take it however you're going to go, and we'll run with it.
Okay. Well, there's a few things. We have mission statements at Parkin that like I do really believe. And one of them is about partnerships. I'll just look at my at it from the website here. We foster collaboration, partnerships, and the sharing of knowledge to build better communities. Really, from this, it's you come into a project, and we don't approach it with a sense of ego. There's not some kind of definitive Parkin style that we need to impose on the project. The thing I think that makes us special is that each project is a partnership. So that means we start by listening to the client and learning from them. Then we say, okay, we're coming in with our own knowledge from past experiences. So we share those experiences, we share that knowledge. And from there, it's a collaborative approach to develop solutions that really are honing in on that specific client's very specific needs. The partnership with the client is critical. And then on top of that, because they're all P3 or design build projects, the partnership with the contractor is also essential.
Yeah.
We need to maintain the vision. We need to achieve those outcomes, right? But we also have this pressure about the budget and the schedule. And the way the system of P3s and design builds is built, it's walking that fine line. So those partnerships are absolutely critical. That's kind of like macro level how I would start answering your question. But from there, the next mission statement's about our work itself and being driven by innovation. So I'll read that. We design innovative solutions to promote positive and enduring social change. We really bring curiosity to each project. We have excellent clinical designers who, like, this is their passion, this is their drive. They've been known to take a day off from the office, suit up in scrubs, and go spend a day in the life with clinicians to understand what's day-to-day life like. What are your responsibilities?
Do any of them have degrees in medicine or not?
So we actually have a registered nurse who's not an architect on staff, although I swear every day she's becoming more of an architect. She's sketching in Bluebeam and things like that. But we have people that have been just doing this for so long that have done all kinds of experience, but also we really root all of our work in evidence-based design principles. So EDEX certified professionals, lean principles, things like that. So we immerse ourselves in understanding what it takes to run a hospital. We understand what each department there to do. We understand procedures. We get people. We have equipment experts that came from procurement on the healthcare side, on the health authority side, that now work with us and help us understand equipment solutions. But so ultimately embedding these evidence-based design principles in the work to drive solutions. These are tested and proven methods that we've taken away from all of our study and all of our experience. We can then work with our clients and actually serve as educators for them, and kind of meeting them at that intersection of design and clinical best practices. But I guess I haven't really answered your question. I think that...
No, you started to.
I've started to. I guess we see ourselves as architects of care, and we actually had a marketing exercise recently. We did a rebrand and came up with a tagline: "Designed with care." It's on our it's on our drawings and on our website and things like that. But we really do live by it. We are architects of care, and that extends not just to healthcare, but education itself is a standard of care, justice. And corrections. Compulsory care is part of a healing process. And there's lessons that you take from one sector and that can really be applied to another. So we really see care in all of our work. But back to the hospital itself, whether it's a $50,000 project or it's a $500 million new build, everything is designed with real care and attention to detail, to all aspects of the building.
One of the things Shane talked about that really stuck with me is how architecture isn't just about aesthetics. It's about experience. That holds true whether it's a hospital or a home. And for me, when I think about where experience matters in design decisions, I think about Kaplan's. I've got to know the family that runs it, and they care, truly, 3 generations later, about the people walking through their doors. Whether it's outfitting an outdoor kitchen or trying to decide between a Wolf or DCS Grill, Kaplan's has the goods. Could even be Lynx, Kalamazoo. But more importantly, they've built a showroom that makes it easy to see, feel, and imagine how things will actually function in your life. It's a client-first kind of place. And I think that matters more than ever. If you'd like to get connected with them, please feel free to reach out to me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca, and I'll introduce you to one of their specialists who will understand what your needs are and your client needs are so that they can connect you with the right person to help fulfill that experience for you and your clients. Are there specific areas that you look at from like the engagement standpoint with, be it either a patient, the staff, or it could be family of the patient, like where you know that at the entry, that it has to be really warm and inviting, and like there's the requirement for this beautiful materiality that's going to really resonate and connect with the inhabitants, or light. Like I'm curious to understand like that side of it more, because when you walk into an old hospital, you definitely don't feel that. When you walk into
Mhm.
some hospitals that have now had additions and revisions to the existing renovations, you feel it.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So off the top, we recognize that the grand architectural gesture of a really important civic building
Yeah.
is of great importance, but it has to make the space inviting and unintimidating.
Yeah.
People are often entering facilities of care in this sort of distressed, either
Yes.
physical and or mental state.
Yeah. Panicked.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and you're rushing to an emergency department. You don't know where it is. You're looking for those letters in red, and it's maybe you're bringing a loved one there, or maybe it's you yourself. So the building itself, the architecture itself, can be one of the first steps in the healing process. But if it isn't successful, if it's like those old hospitals you're talking about, or if it misses the mark, that initial experience of the facility when you arrive, if it's a negative one, it can really have an adverse effect on the care itself.
Yeah.
So we recognize that there's incredible balance needed with the big architectural aesthetic and thematic ideals, but also understanding who are the end users, what is their journey, and what are the challenges presented to them, and we've got to balance this with the fine grain, minute details. There's the experience of the patient or the family members. There's also the experience of the staff. And
Yeah.
if the staff aren't in themselves in a good place
Yeah.
to deliver care, then the care is going to suffer. So ergonomics at care team stations, shortening of the travel distance between within a department, between stations, or between departments, things like that is absolutely incredibly important. The getting those fine details right, and that's back to that kind of puzzle I was talking about with putting together a hospital, and merging all of these requirements, and getting things to complement one another as best as you can. But then there's also kind of bigger picture things, like learning from the indigenous communities or differently abled, marginalized individuals. We need to find ways that make buildings more inviting and to be representative of these communities, and really be accessible. And so that first kind of gesture, that grand gesture, the experience of approaching and entering a site and entering a building, it's got to really remove barriers, and those are both physical and mental barriers. And you've got to create a space that really fosters connection, inclusivity, and support or belonging, so that all individuals feel like it's their building for their
It helps
community.
like diffuse despair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you can take it from a 10 to a 7, you're taking you're going in the right direction.
Yeah. It's interesting, as you said, you talk about the level of care that the staff can provide based on the building. And when you reference there the concept of short commutes between stations to patient rooms and between departments, like that concept, I think that anyone that's listening to this right now has likely been in a hospital at some stage, whether you visited someone, you were there yourself, yeah, I mean, I guess those are really the only two. You're either visiting someone, you're with someone, or you're there yourself. Or maybe perhaps you're part of the design team. But like if you've been to a hospital, you can understand and appreciate in some of those inefficient spaces what it's like when you have to walk through corridor to corridor to get to a building, to get to
Yep.
the next wing, and how exhaustive that can be when you might need a washroom, and it can be right there, but it's just not there.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it is there and you just don't know it's there.
You
And,
know
you
it's
know,
there. Yeah.
sometimes it's about intuitive wayfinding and, you know, the actual experience of that space is as well. Yeah. Everyone's experienced that. So, and buildings are getting bigger and bigger. And so those distances naturally want to get longer and longer. So
How do you circumvent that? Like what?
it's really basing things in evidence-based principles. Each new hospital brings new advancements, and so being, you know, abreast of what's current, what's being done, kind of breaking new barriers and things like that. So, you know, getting out to conferences or attending webinars or continuing along with EDAC training, things like that is really important for our staff. We have a big presence most years at the Healthcare Design Conference in the US,
Yeah.
the European Health Design Congress in London. And so, you know, this is all kind of part of making sure that we're at the forefront of delivering this kind of care through design.
And what does it look like for the practice kind of on a go forward basis? Are there certain specific areas that you are trying to emerge into, or is there certain elements of the practice that you want to see progress in a different way? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's another one. I probably have a couple parts to
Yeah,
answer.
go for it.
The first I'd say is our a lot of our work is through the kind of design build and P3 markets.
Yeah.
And after these contract models themselves have really evolved over time, and we see the projects continually growing in scope and size and complexity, and technology advancements mean we have greater requirements for deliverables. So, you know, our teams are growing, the buildings themselves are growing. And then after we've done dozens and dozens of these kinds of projects across Canada over like 2 decades, we're seeing a need for these projects to take on new models. And one of the main emerging models is that we're really excited about is alliance contracting. It's a fundamentally different type of contract. It takes away a lot of risk transfer, and it's based on a no blame contract model
Okay.
that is based on shared collective risk and responsibility that is within the framework of a fully integrated team that is made up by the owner, the contractor, and the architect. So everyone's at the same table. I liken it to a round table, everyone being at a round table together, as opposed to across a rectangular table from one another, kind of pushing, you know, blame or kind of disputing cost or requirements. And really everything is based on unanimous best for project principle based decision making. There's an open book compensation model. And so, you know, everyone is aware of what everyone's financial stakes.
Yeah.
There's pain share and gain share that is completely linked to key result areas. So if, you know, we've set out the key result areas for a project, these are what we want to achieve. If we go above it, you get, you know, there's gain share. If you go below it, there's pain share. So, you know, the outcomes are clear and everyone is driven to deliver the same, and success for one has got to be success for all. So we're really excited about it because, you know, it fully understands and respects that the private sector participants have commercial drivers, but inherently we just want to do a great job. And it's allowing us to find a way to do that and work collaboratively to do it. It's at the heart of what we do as Parkin, is that focus on collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So we were successful in winning the first healthcare alliance contract. That's the Cowichan District Hospital on Vancouver Island, and I'm a member of that alliance management team. We've had a lot of amazing lessons learned from that. We've then won the second alliance contract model hospital in BC, which is Burnaby phase 2. There's now there's now RFQs coming out in Ontario for alliance projects. And so we're seeing it as something that's sort of growing the same way that P3s kind of emerged in the landscape like 25 years ago. We kind of see this as one of the new models that might really take hold. And the reason why we love it so much is, in the experience after 4 years on Cowichan, it's user engagement drives best for project outcomes, and the collaboration between the owner and the construction team and the design team is evident and constant. And I really do believe, I feel it myself, and I speak with people at the health authority or at the contractor every day. Everyone feels good going to work every day. It feels like a better environment. And
Right.
interestingly enough, that's one of the key result areas. We all benefit both holistically and financially if it's a good experience doing the project. That's one of the key result areas. So that's one of the main things. We're seeing the ability to it breaks barriers to deliver a more sustainable project, to build to design a building that is more inclusive to communities, to actually be able to work with Indigenous communities in a non-structured way, to get feedback from them and to really understand their needs. And that's really been one of my passions from it. So there's just so much you can take from kind of driving past that rigid contract model that we've seen in the past, and kind of breaking it more open and kind of removing a lot of barriers.
As we're talking, I'm looking up what the alliance model is and I don't know where it started and how it started and what it's about.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating how it started.
It's actually interesting to me because I feel like it's very much how we work without it being called the alliance model in our work as a construction company, project management company, where you essentially work, yes, to completely remove risk across the board by all parties having a vested interest in as stakeholders in the success of the project by being as open as you can possibly be.
Yeah,
And it's an easy thing to describe. You can just say all of that and it's great. But to get into the minutia of how to make things visible to all the stakeholders is what really separates businesses from each other when they come together and try to create that environment, because it's really easy to not be successful at that.
Yeah, well, and contracts inform these behaviors. So if the contract's written in a way that there's a corner for you to back into, you're going to back into that corner. But if the contract itself removes all corners, so everyone's in it together, you're all stuck together, you're going to come up with the solutions. And, we've seen it. We're seeing it happen. And, the Cowichan project's now well under construction, the design starting on Burnaby. And yeah, like I said, we're seeing new projects coming up, both in BC and Ontario. And I assume, it'll probably follow in other provinces shortly after that. But the model itself is fascinating. I just want to point out, like, I learned some history about it over all of the kind of alliance training I've done through this project. And I think it was British Petroleum wanted to get oil out of the North Sea, and no contractor was willing to take on the risk. So they said, all right, what if we share some of the gain with you? And, that kind of is the birth of this pain share, gain share mentality. But from there, you had to build this structure. And then it actually didn't really take off in the UK, but it ended up being hugely successful on I guess horizontal infrastructure projects in Australia. Tons of railways and totally. And tons of railways, tons of highway overpasses and highways and things like that. And then emerging into I think like transit projects and things like that. But never actually, before.
I'm just reading now. For anyone that's sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but the Hamilton LRT project.
Yeah, right. And I mean, there's an amazing story in BC of 2021. There was these terrible windstorms and the atmospheric river sweeping through the Lower Mainland, and it actually washed out a whole bunch of bridges on the Coquihalla Highway, which is not the Trans Canada, but it is the main connection from basically Calgary to Vancouver. And you were never going to go with conventional contract model to get some contractor on board, designers on board, to come up with designs and replace those bridges and get that highway up and running in a short period of time. Expedient way. It was never going to happen. So they said, we got to do something different. They brought in an alliance, and they had it open in a couple weeks with 2 lanes with temporary bridges that gave them the time to build permanent bridges on one side and then tear down the temporary one and build the new one. And it was back and running, I think, in 6 or 8 months completely.
Imagine if this was Asia. Okay. And how much quicker that would happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd take days.
All the bureaucracy associated with the approvals, and all of a sudden, boom, those bridges are back up a couple of weeks.
When there's shared interest, that's what it all comes down
Totally.
to. When there's shared interest, it happens. So anyway, we interestingly enough, this is the first time we've seen what we consider a vertical alliance. So we've got a 10-story hospital with tons of departments and a helipad, and like it's for an entire community. It's just got a lot of partners, a lot of interested parties and stakeholders and rights holders. And so an alliance is befitting because you've got to find a way to merge all of those interests. And you got to have confidence that you've hired a builder and a design team that is truly interested in solving those and not trying to win a project based on enough. So the project has all of these diverse interested parties, and what you really need is a passionate, willing participant from a contractor side and from the design team who's willing to work to best for project outcomes and be less concerned about just winning a project by a race to the lowest fee or the lowest cost. And it really, because it eliminates that mechanism basically as the main driver, it allows relationships to be at the heart of it and confidence in the ability to work together and work collaboratively.
And
So that's something we're very excited about.
yeah,
Obviously.
so you have not yet completed a project in this format, have you?
No, everyone is watching Couchin and waiting with bated breath to see
Yeah,
the outcomes. But
right.
yeah, I can say from working in it day to day that we're very optimistic about it.
We are starting a newsletter. It's called Inside the Challenge. We want you to be a part of it, either as a consumer of the information or to record the information. The concept is simple. We're going to book a 10 to 20-minute time on Zoom, and you're going to record with me and share your challenge. If you don't want to record, well, how about you consume it? You can email me to either record with me or email me to register and sign up to receive the newsletter. People are going to be talking about the challenges of operations, of sales, of constructability, how personal elements are affecting their professional life. I've already recorded a whole bunch of them from people in the industry, the owners of architecture practices and design practices and consulting practices. We really look forward to getting this out to you. Feel free to connect. Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca. We look forward to getting this to you. And so what have you found to be one of the intrinsic differences between the active project that you have right now in this format and everything else that you don't have in this format? What have you noticed at this stage of construction? Do you feel like you're closer to budget? Are you closer to schedule? Do you feel like you have had less changes through the course of the construction? Or am I completely off in those three potential variations?
So because it's open book, we're all monitoring the budget very closely. In a traditional project, you have a statement of requirements, this giant, massive document that effectively is written 8 or 10 years before the project actually is going to be finished. And you're never going to be able to predict what your actual needs are. So you just kind of have all of these different requirements in there as best as the client can imagine, and then it's about delivering on the things that are written there. So ultimately what we're doing instead is building the requirements together and really landing in a collaborative way with the client, the health authority, and the contractor. What is best for project? Do we really need to deliver this standard here? Can we afford to do something different there and do more here? And it's balancing those requirements and recognizing that we're all trying to manage a budget and meet kind of best for project decision making throughout. So you're seeing way more client involvement. You're not getting caught up in sort of red tape and procedure in the process. You're eliminating a lot of sort of compliance back and forth, where it's kind of statements of compliance that then get argued over giant Excel files for weeks and months on end. Instead, we're just focusing on doing the work and doing a good job of it and doing it together. So everyone's thinking of budget, everyone's thinking of outcomes together at the same time, and I think it's bearing a lot of fruit. One of my favorite anecdotes from now in the construction phase is we do these pre-board walkthroughs before the drywall goes up in like the emergency department, let's say. And we have the medical director on the project coming on walks with us, and he knows these departments intimately. He's in the user groups, and he's in there with the contractor, with the site architects, And we stumble upon a room, and a wall is 400 millimeters out of place. It's going to make the shower room too large and the locker room too small. We're not going to be able to fit the lockers based on the design. We're trying to figure out what happened and how long is it going to take to correct this. And we instead just put our heads together in that moment and say, okay, what do we really need? Is there any other solution? And within about 10 minutes, we all agree, okay, we're going to do some shifts here, some shifts there. We might lose one locker, but we had more than we needed. And we won't lose pace on schedule. We won't divert, a sub trade from progressing elsewhere because they have to come back. And it was like a true best for project alliance moment. And those aren't really possible on a conventional project because you're never having the owner, the builder, and the design team there in these moments. But we're doing it collaboratively.
So how frequently are you having either on-site or off-site meetings with the associated parties of the alliance to be able to manage all the facets of the project?
You mean how many times a day? It's all the time. It's a fully integrated team. Yeah.
So it's all day.
Yeah, I met with the contractor at 7:30 this morning. I have a call with the design and construction meeting later today. Yesterday, I met with one of the working groups that focuses on the key result areas, and it's literally all parties that working together at all times. It's effectively a organization of multiple organizations.
Right. So you'll have preset meetings on a regular basis, daily basis with different parties. And then do you have allotments for your ad hoc meetings that were required based on what you just said? There's a site condition that has to get resolved. And so everybody just says they're going to meet at site tomorrow.
Yeah, there's kind of a series of meetings, site walks and things like that are all scheduled. And then there's space to kind of resolve ad hoc as necessary. And there's kind of structure for coming together to quickly resolve an issue. We have a change working group every Friday morning that, takes issues that would in theory have change to the cost or the requirements. And we assess what's the best way forward with this. And that's been a really successful mechanism.
And is all of this managed online through email, or is it managed through like a platform that individual parties have connectivity to? Like, what does that look like?
It's a bit of a combination. There's some shared SharePoint space or a lot of kind of collaboration through Teams and that sort of thing. But there's also some organizational lines that are naturally drawn by IT firewalls and things like that. But it's collaborating as closely as we possibly can, and I think that'll just get better over time. Each new alliance project will have barriers removed. It's obviously I'm pretty passionate about it because I just know what it's like in the two different models, and I'm excited about one for sure. You did ask a question a long time ago about where else we see things going, and
emerging.
One of the other things, especially in our work in healthcare, that we are really eager about is how we can learn and push for a more sustainable outcome in building, and like hospitals, and especially huge hospital campuses. Like it's so easy to say this is an incredibly important part of our community and it takes a ton of energy, and that's just what it is. But we have to do better. We have to, give up on that excuse and say, what can we do to make this a place of generation of energy, or, regeneration of ecosystems, and really focus on how the hospitals can give healing outcomes or positive outcomes to the community around it in more ways than just the healthcare itself. So, there's no answer. There's one passive house hospital we've heard about in Germany, but we're taking steps here in North America, especially on a couple of our projects. For instance, Western Memorial in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. That was, I believe, the first fully electric hospital in Canada.
Electric?
Yeah, fully electric. So not relying on any kind of like gas-fired boilers or anything. And geothermal is like, there's a massive football field-sized layout of geothermal piping, and that's the primary heating and cooling source. Cowichan itself will be the next fully electric hospital. So these are among the first in all of North America, pushing boundaries with Cowichan on net zero carbon design, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, hold on. All electric hospital. I'm going to say it again. Okay? For everyone that is listening to this, Just let that sink in for a second. I'm going to say it one more time. It's an all electric hospital. Okay. Like,
Thank you for pointing it. Yeah, thank you for dwelling on that point. I don't think it's a small coincidence that the two locations are places that rely heavily on hydroelectric power. So, dams, and these
yeah,
are places with, abundance of hydroelectric energy. It will be
to
more
be able,
challenging, I'm sure, in other
but to
in
be
other
able to draw
jurisdictions, but
upon that type of resource and to have an appetite for it, because there's a lot of creative solutions you have to come up with because gas is just so easy
yeah. And I'll
to.
say this, it was not a requirement of the projects. Especially, well, I don't know about Cornerbrook, but on Cowichan, it was not a requirement. And our consultant team came forward and said, "What if we did this?" And the alliance allowed
I
the
was going to say it
space
was
to explore it.
proposed, and the stakeholders said yes.
Yeah, we said, "Is it reasonable within budget?" Because it is definitely something we would strive to do.
So, so you said it's geothermal for heating.
That was the Cornerbrook
Oh,
project.
sorry, corner. I'm combining them. So
Yeah,
how can I ask? Like, what is that? How are you structuring? Like, I assume you must have massive banks of batteries for and generators for backup power should you have
yeah.
a power outage.
And the caveat is generators that are non-electric. They're
Yeah,
they're they're natural gas.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the building daily functions are fully electric. There's big photovoltaic array, and then it's drawing on the grid, which is largely, like I said, large hydroelectric.
And
Um,
solar at all or no? Did it not pay in this scenario?
oh, sorry, yeah, there's a very large solar photovoltaic array on
Oh,
the
sorry,
on
sorry.
yeah
Okay.
on the parts of the roof that weren't impacted by the kind of flight patterns of the
Yeah.
heliport. On top of that, designing for 2050 and in some cases 2080 climate data. Like many projects actually just ask you for today's climate scenario.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
meaningless.
forward thinking, saying, you know what, tomorrow's coming fast.
It's
So let's
it's
design
such a
like it's coming.
it's such a stupid idea to say. I'm sorry, like was a simpleton of a word, but like at the same time, how can you ask about the climate of today when the project's generally not going to finish what could be 5 to 10 years,
Yeah,
right?
it's a very, very fair point. So that's changing.
Yeah.
That's something that is now becoming more common. There's something great in BC, this salmon safe certification, meaning that the water on site, it's a large site, it collects a lot of water. It's a slope site, especially, so it's shedding a lot of water into the watershed, and the kind of
Quality of the water.
the network of streams and creeks and rivers, the Cowichan River itself, is
Yeah.
the lifeblood of the traditional community, the indigenous community, the Cowichan peoples, and
Yeah.
the diverse network of nations that are all around it. And they still fish daily. There are smokehouses throughout the region, and people are constantly, catching salmon, smoking them, and preserving them for the winter. It's a daily staple, and it's seen as kind of like a life-giving staple.
Right.
So it's incredibly important to the indigenous community to know that the project itself is treating water so that it has no adverse effect the salmon population downstream. So this is an organization in the Pacific Northwest that is now gaining a lot of traction and getting a lot more projects that are salmon
Right.
salmon safe certified.
So essentially it's an organization within the indigenous community that helps to certify that the.
Sorry, yes, all of that, except it's not within the indigenous community.
Oh, it's
just
not.
it's just in the general community.
But does the indigenous community do they have to certify anything? Where
No,
no? Okay, okay.
no, it's independent organization that is doing it with professionals, kind of a network of professionals throughout the region that are kind of trained in it and,
Yeah, yeah.
and able to certify. Those are key things, kind of driving. And then for me, like, I would love to know how can water collection be given back into the civic system, or electricity be provided back to grids. Like, I would love to know how we can start to push this. Or another really interesting one is food. You've been to hospitals, and if you've ever had to eat,
One topic.
yeah, if you've ever had to eat the food, it's probably not making you all that much better. It's based on budgets and things like that. And to be able to drive better health outcomes through food, and even to grow food on the site, you're seeing, emerging trends within that area. There's just so much more that can be a fully holistic approach to sustainable communities and sustainable hospitals.
I mean, what you just described there is probably one of the most interesting things I could think of. The fact that there's the contemplation of could we house areas within the hospital to be able to grow our own food?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting, and it's
You're
not.
laughing. I'm like, come on, like really?
Yeah, I guess we've been hearing murmurs of it in the industry for a long time.
You're in the community.
Yeah, I'd love to see it becoming. I'd love to see a really successful version of it, and there are a couple interesting projects in Europe, especially. But I'd love to see it become more of a standard. There's just a lot there. And then the other one is these are huge buildings. They're getting bigger and bigger. Sometimes you're seeing small hospitals closed in favor of one giant hospital. And we're doing the Trillium Project and the Ottawa Hospital. These are the biggest healthcare projects, I think, in Canadian history. And it's really amalgamating smaller facilities. But there is a future, I think, where we see less of that and more decentralization, more healthcare in the home, and figuring out ways to bring care closer.
Yeah, like almost
kind of
like rural
15-minute cities.
Hubs.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of exploration into that, and we're actually going to be focusing some of our kind of research over the coming years into developing more ideas around that. So yeah, those are some of the things we're kind of excited about, and it's really early days, I think.
Gonna say it again, all electric.
Fully electric hospitals. Yeah,
I mean,
we did present at the European Healthcare Design Congress in this past summer, and there was a lot of attention to the fact that we were now on to a second fully electric hospital, and it's pretty significant on the world stage.
I mean, we're presenting numbers to a client on their home in a couple of days, which will have been months prior to when we're now listening to this. Which is funny. Coming up in the future, but now when you're listening to this, it was in the past.
Back to the future, getting the DeLorean.
And we're talking about the idea of an all-electric home and eliminating any gas requirements as much as we can. More and more people are looking at that. So, it's a beautiful thing to know that can be done on the large scale, and it should deserve recognition, and it should be the topic of discussions at conferences. It should.
A bit of a sidebar there. The city of Vancouver had actually passed a bylaw that eliminated natural gas from new build homes. And then the current mayor sought to reverse that. And the design industry and the building industry really pushed back against it. And, Parkin was one of the many companies that signed a letter saying that we do not stand by this. Yeah. And council ended up not passing that motion, which, it's great to see that we're standing up for sustainable. Yeah, the collective is standing up for sustainable outcomes and not focusing on kind of economic drivers.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Shane, I'm going to say it now. So thank you so much. I appreciate the fact that there was a connection that was made for us, and that you were able to take the time to do this in the morning. The information you've just provided is I have found so interesting. Clearly, I'm haven't stopped interrupting you throughout this entire discussion. Thank you for the candor. Thank you for the time. Thank you for being such a great sport and being open to getting on this call and not knowing exactly where we would end up. But I'm happy with where we did, because I do think that it sounds to me like you're on the cutting edge of what healthcare should be looking like. And I look forward to maintaining contact and learning more about what you do and what you're doing in the future, because I will one day end up in a hospital, and I want to know that
it's inevitability.
I want to know what's happening on the back end of it when it's getting built.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's a real pleasure to chat. And we really just scratched the surface on the work that we're doing. There's a lot of really exciting stuff into the other kind of architectures of care. I'm sure that you'd have a great conversation with some of our other members of our Parkin team about some of the things happening in corrections or that kind of thing, mental health and things like that. Because there's just a lot there. But I really appreciate the conversation. It's been really enjoyable, and thanks so much for your time.
Of course, I'm gonna close with this and say that I hope that in the next within the next year or so I'm out in BC. So I'd like to connect. I'd like, if possible, go see one of these projects. It'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a delight. Thanks.
Thank you.